the big selling point of AI related to healthcare is people who don't have access. It can be life-changing.
You do need that partnership. You do need a strategic view when it comes to your health. And you need guidance and interventions that are personalized and timed, obviously accessible to a very, very small number of people. And the only way that we can close that gap and really start making people healthier at the population level is to use these technologies.
You, 20 some odd years ago, actually got a degree in artificial intelligence.
I started one. This was 25 years ago. Artificial intelligence was, hope is not really the right word or passion, but it was one of the things, that I was spending most of the time kind of reading, being excited about. So that's, I did my kind of first degree was in electronic engineering. Not a huge amount was happening in the space. This was kind of in the days where people were trying to figure out symbolic systems and philosophical kind of investigations into artificial intelligence. And you had neural networks they were going through that phase where they had been discovered and people were kind of applying neuroscience principles to neural networks. And I was convinced that from a kind of species evolution kind of perspective, machines and data would have a transformative kind of effect. I was reading about transhumanism and Nick Bostrom and all that stuff that people were starting to do way back when in North Yorkshire in York, where I was studying at the time. And then I started a master's in information processing and neural networks at the Department of Mathematics at King's College, London.
So for those of us who don't know what a neural network exactly is, can you just explain that?
A neural network is a computational kind of approach to mimicking learning and mimicking eventually potential intelligence using the way that your brain is structured. So our brain is connected, is a series of synapses that are interconnected with each other. And the way that we learn as humans as babies is through this process of reinforcement learning. You've got inputs, you process those inputs, you have actions, and you see things happening in your world. And your brain forms these connections through this series of networks that become richer and richer and richer, or actually less richer. So the way that we learn is as we repeat something, as we grow that kind of range of stimulus, certain connections become stronger, certain patterns are kind of encoded in our brains, and this is how we learn. So the idea was if you could recreate that mathematically first, and then you were to build that in a kind of software environment, could you start learning? And this is where a lot of the machine learning kind of models came from early on. There reached a little bit of kind of a plateau, and then deep learning kind of came in, and then some of the kind of new technologies started applying a different lens and a different approach to the problem. And we arrived to large language models that are a different computational approach, but a lot of that kind of thinking really influenced where we've ended up in the last, 10 or so years.
You're now 8 years into building a company called Numan. Can you just give a little background on it?
Numan is a health platform that brings together medication, diagnostics, access to experts, and then digital tools to help you lead a healthier, happier, longer life. So we focus on making you healthier today and then give you the tools, the understanding, the supervision, the support for you to be healthier into the future. And we do that by, first of all, helping you achieve now a healthy weight. We help you achieve healthy hormonal health, whether you're a man or a woman. And we give you guidance and direction on some core pillars of your health that have to do with sleep, exercise, nutrition, and mindset, some of those fundamentals. So we're building a healthspan platform. We're not calling it that. And we do that directly for the patient. We do it entirely within our ecosystem. So we're a fully integrated health provider here in the UK. And I first started building tried to do this business back in 2012. And at the time, I started from this point of health optimization, but I quickly realized that, from a supply perspective, the only way that you could build a platform like that back then was by building like a real bricks and mortar clinic. And I was pretty terrified of doing that. But also from a demand perspective, this was very much that a small niche of people around the Bay Area mostly, and maybe a little bit in London, New York, were interested in. But also I didn't have a strong hook or a proposition at the time. So I walked away from it, did something different, and then came back to the problem in 2018.
Got it. And so just give us a sense of scale now, like how big is the business?
So we've treated about 800,000 patients here in the UK. We're going to treat a few 100,000 this year alone of new and existing patients. The business is in the hundreds of millions of revenue. It's profitable since about end of 2023. And it's been growing more than 100% over the last couple of years.
It's 2026. You have been thinking about AI for 20 plus years. You now have the ability to implement it into your business. And at the same time, you're now in a business that is fairly regulated, at least in the regions that you operate in. And at the same time, you've got all the LLM platforms talking about health. So there's a lot to cover here. Let's just talk through first 2025 and before. How have you been using AI since sort of the aha moment of ChatGPT a few years ago?
I thought that, data and machine learning would play a role in our business, but I thought it was much further into the future. And I was very skeptical of applying AI in our space for a very long time. When OpenAI released ChatGPT, it was a watershed moment. We didn't do anything for the first, I think, 6 to 12 months. It was too early. There were and still are issues with hallucinations and reliability, but also traceability and explainability of how these products work. And explainability, you can't really get there. Being able to trace back and prove all the steps that you took to arrive at the decision. So you don't know how OpenAI found the answer that they gave. So you can't really use it out of the box and put it in front of a patient. I mean, you could, but operating in healthcare, we're very careful, by the way, and we'll talk a little bit about how we use AI to only expose this kind of engagement with a user with things that are well-being related. So nutrition and exercise are the core use cases. We've put a lot of effort to make sure we can isolate that away from anything that is clinical or can even be interpreted as clinical. Because where we operate in the UK, you cannot do that. It's a very different environment in the US, but we take great care not to do this. So if you go back to when ChatGPT was released, there was a lot of excitement, but also caution. And at the time, the models still were quite early, but you could see the improvements that were happening very, very quickly at that time, kind of almost on a quarterly basis. So we started after about 18 or so months. We started very kind of experimentally, so plugging different models in, building a lot of the tooling to evaluate those models, building a lot of tooling to do our own, create our own RAG and create our own set of prompts, creating our own content, but also using our team of human coaches and clinicians to review every single interaction that we had in a very closed controlled beta for quite a long period of time. So we had eventually about a few thousand patients that we were working with, where every single conversation was reviewed and rated for efficacy, for safety, and for accuracy as well. And then we built our own tools to be able to evaluate new conversations and the tools that we built.
When you talk about the tools to evaluate the models, what were you doing sort of back then, and how easy was it, and how has that process evolved real quickly?
It hasn't been easy. It wasn't easy back then, and it is still something that we're kind of continuously evolving. We've moved from some of the tools that were completely proprietary to using some of the larger platforms out there that let you set up your models, evaluate them, and use them. So now we do some of that with external tools. At the beginning there was nothing, right? And we did speak to a few companies that were charging 6 figures per year to give you something that was pretty basic. Now there's a lot of open source tools available. There's a whole kind of range, and there's also a lot more talent that is able to work with these tools.
You're beginning the process of evaluating the tools and how your customer interactions sort of play into that.
Exactly.
And then what year is this, just to frame it?
We started growing in 2024.
Okay.
Early 2024. It took us about a year until we scaled that out to pretty much a little more longer than a year to all of our patients. And now every single patient that comes to Numan, every single obesity patient that comes to Numan is connected with an AI behavioral coach that can be on a standalone, kind of on a one-to-one basis, but also is connected to the human coach. So the conversations between our AI coach are fed into the human coach that also kind of the patient directly engages with. So it's a hybrid coaching model that we have. And we're doing a lot of work with a regulator here in the UK, the MHRA, that has released this airlock program where you bring together, there's 6 companies in the UK that are participating this year. You have effectively, think of it as a sandbox, like a safe environment where you're testing what you could be building and where the regulation is. And you're figuring out the limitations, you're figuring out best practice, and you're working together to figure out a way to release products at scale.
You have almost 4 parties here. You've got Numan, the patient, healthcare or the advisor, and then the government.
Correct.
And
the healthcare advisor is part of Numan as well.
Got it. Okay. Is it the AI takes the first pass and then passes it off to somebody? How does that flow work to ensure that you're leveraging the model's true capabilities, but also not letting it run hog wild?
We're not leveraging the model's true capabilities. So for example, if you come to Numan and you say, I got a blood test result and my cholesterol is high, for example, or I want to give you my blood test results, we won't be able to advise you on that, because that would be quite close to being a medical device. Don't ask me how, when people are already doing that at scale every single day, what does that kind of mean, right? Because, and this is what I mean in terms of the difference in a regulatory approach, because we are healthcare providers and we have a direct relationship with a patient. We are not doing anything that interprets the information that you provide to us within a clinical context. So the people who will come to Numan, they will have a coach that is there this is today, right? This is January 2026. Very soon that might be different. But they will be able to seek advice and get support and have a conversation that also has memory there and personalization, so they know who you are as a patient, your preferences. And then you're going to be able to get advice on your nutrition, your exercise, and other things that are not clinically connected to the treatment that you're getting.
And that's because of the regulation, not because of the capabilities.
Correct.
Even though somebody might be taking that blood work, putting it into ChatGPT, doing something else, that it's just to be on the side of the right side, for lack of a better word, you're eliminated from doing that or prohibited.
Correct. We're taking a view that interprets the regulation and the guidance that is out there. This is not our view is that this we're exploring exactly how we would be able to do that. In fact, that is the work that we're doing with the MHRA, is to look at, can we build a blood test analyzer that is personalized, and it is safe, and it is actionable and meaningful? And if we were to do that, where would we what would be the missteps that we might take that we need to be careful of? What is missing in the regulation that we need to kind of work together to figuring out? So that's the work that we're doing with the MHRA.
Got it. And so when you think about where you are today, just in this context, because I want to move to other parts, are we in stage 0, stage 1? Like, where in your ability to use it from a patient evaluation, clinical perspective are we really sitting today?
When it comes to, let's say, the ultimate goal is to have a doctor in your pocket that knows you intimately and knows exactly what you should be doing next. If that is, I don't know, step 5, we're somewhere between the step 0 and 1. You just had a release in the US of a company that has taken on like fully automated prescribing decisions within a very specific context, right? That is a huge first step. We're helping our clinicians make decisions. So for example, you have scribes are now some of the tools that productivity tools for clinicians. They are getting good traction, and they're still taking though inefficiencies and friction out, and they're saving clinicians some time, but only some time. And there's a kind of binary difference between going fully automated, software driven, and finding efficiencies for humans. I think it's going to take a while until we get there. I think it's important that we take careful steps and work with the regulators to do that safely. As much as I'm excited to make full use of these tools and put them in front of patients, the worst thing you can do right now is just misleading people, which is the space that we're in. It is easy in ways that are unexpected to make mistakes that can have consequences in a different way than when you're building software in any other space. So I'd rather we take it a little bit more slowly and we get it right, rather than rush into it, regret it, and take a few steps back as a result.
The big selling point of AI related to healthcare is people who don't have access to medicine, who don't have access. It can be life-changing. Do you take that point of view that eventually this just allows you to scale in ways you wouldn't because of the access to clinicians is limited?
We're not making enough clinicians. We're not producing enough good graduates of medical schools to be able to close the gaps that we have in healthcare. Even if we did, we wouldn't have enough money to pay them. And then if you also take the view that if you take a health view as opposed to a healthcare view, to make somebody healthy, as a clinical professional, and oftentimes as a person that is engaged and kind of interested in their health, the things that you need to be doing. But you do need that partnership. You do need a strategic view when it comes to your health. And you need guidance and interventions that are personalized and timely. You cannot do that. Some people are doing that by paying a huge amount of money and having their concierge doctor on hand on their WhatsApp, and maybe they're getting close to that experience. But then you're talking at the lower end, a few £1,000s per year. Maybe here in the UK, in LA, would be $50,000 per year. So that is obviously accessible to a very, very small number of people. And the only way that we can close that gap and really start making people healthier at the population level is to use these technologies. But you need to connect them in an ecosystem and an environment where you can close the loop, where you can also handle medication. They need to step away from just lifestyle and behavioral support or other things that are not, they don't have the clinical responsibility and effect that you can get by using medication.
Right. So that closed loop, to be able to understand what's right and what's real, that'll always be an issue, presumably, because it will evolve, diseases evolve, new medicines come out. Is that a fair way to think about it?
It will be an issue and will be a challenge, because you do need to kind of close it the other way, right? You need to be able to manage side effects. You need to, there's also, I don't know where we are when I say that's kind of where we're going to go.
Yeah.
It's still not been proven at what scale and at what depth you can keep accuracy and consistency and safety, right? So imagine somebody that has multiple comorbidities, takes multiple medications, and there's multiple interactions from all of those, and you want to have interventions and recommendations over a period of time. There's no LLM that you can chuck that in, let's say, and it will give you back a reliable, safe set of outputs. So we'll get there, but how we get there is not something we know how to do today. But you can see over the next 5 years, looking back at what's happened in the last 5 years, you have to imagine that we'll both evolve maybe beyond and outside and around LLMs, but then at scale, we will be able to start using these technologies much deeper across the care journey.
That show House from a long time ago, where his number one statement was everybody lies. And so the complication of solving the problem when the patients aren't even telling you the truth on the input basis must make it even more magnified, right? Because you don't even know, oh no, I never drink, and then because they don't want to admit it even to the model, let alone their doctor. So
the path we're working on and what we believe is empower and enable the humans to do the job that they love doing and the job that they went into medicine for. Use these tools to stay engaged with a patient and remove as much friction and cost as you can from the ecosystem, our ecosystem, and the wider ecosystem, and then get more data across that journey, whether that is through your wearables, whether that is through the inputs from the user, whether that is through screening. Somebody might lie to you that they're not drinking, but you will be able to see their behavior and their sleep changing and everything else. So we will eventually be able to have sophisticated enough data sets to accommodate for that as well. But even in that case, I think you do want to have a human in the loop, but they're going to be a lot more strategic or kind of last mile when you do need to have a physical examination. You will have to go and see somebody, and perhaps
eventually there has to be a real human.
Yeah.
You have this company where you're highly regulated in this one area, and then you've got experience in AI and you've got an 8-year-old organization. Like, where else are you applying AI within the company?
We use Cursor for coding. We use Intercom.
And how has the team responded to that, out of curiosity? Because we've heard from a bunch of people that there are developers who are all over it and embracing it, and that there are sort of people who are naysayers. But obviously that changes every few months.
Some of the people that are some of our most experienced engineers are the ones that engage the most and the fastest with these tools, and the ones that can also get the best results and outcomes. So again, if you go higher up the capability stack, from writing code to thinking of problems and designing solutions, the more experience and confidence you have, but root it all the way down on how you build good software, the more able you can use higher abstraction, because you also know where you can anticipate where the challenges will be. For somebody perhaps that is maybe a little bit earlier in their career, it's a bit more challenging.
So that's interesting. So the experienced developers, the ones who understand the most, can get the most leverage from it, whereas the folks... So side note then, all these businesses that are popping up with, through vibe coding and everyone launching, what do you think that means for the scalability of any of those, when you have non-developers trying to knock those out of the park?
I don't have a great view. I think it's going to be... I don't think those people are building things for scale necessarily. But you also have, I was discussing this with a friend of mine who he's a founder. He's a CTO. He programmed all his life. He's opened a Pilates business with his wife. I hope he wouldn't mind me sharing that. He's vibe coding the hell out of everything in the back end of that business. So
That's perfect use case of vibe coding right there. Yeah.
So he's the one he's accountable to for his tools. He's the one that does the filtering of the outputs, but he's transformed everything about the back end of that business. And he's loving it and he's getting real results. Whereas before he either wouldn't do it or he would have to hire a team or he would never go and, I don't know, hire an agency to build software for him for his Pilates business. So for some of that stuff, I think it's, really interesting to see how you use these tools and how our thinking. This takes me a little bit when I think about my 5.5-year-old and the whole like how you apply AI in education, which I don't really think you should. That's my view. Like you should still stick, not early on at least, you should stick to the fundamentals. But how you use creativity for people to build things as they are kind of forming their views of the world, it's, I have no idea when, the 5-year-olds of today will be doing when they're 13 and 14, right? But it will be, pretty mind-blowing, hopefully.
So going back to Cursor, how did you settle on Cursor? I mean, there's, next month, there's going to be another one that is Claude Code is out there promoting. I mean, how do you end up with one? And like, how easy is it to change?
We're already, I know there's a debate about Claude versus Cursor. I think it was what seemed to be the right tool at the time. I think we jumped on that pretty quickly, but we might be maturing out of it. And it was, I'm not really sure, just whatever fit better with the environment that we had, I guess.
And you don't hear from the team that the switching costs are material to go from one to the other? Like, does Cursor have a moat that becomes unpenetrable, do you think?
I really think if the quality difference is there, whatever the switching cost is, it's going to be worth it. Now, of course, that invites the other question, like how often are you going to do this? But it really depends on how much like the quality difference. And then at some point also, you will start making some bigger commitments, I think, to some of those companies based on values, based on approach, based on direction, based on who you can trust, and how they act in the ecosystem will become quite important as well. You do not want to be using the tools of, I don't know, somebody that wants to go and get quite close maybe to what you're building. But let's see.
So it's one of the most interesting things about this time of where we are in the cycle, where there's so many potential partners and so many potential vendors. The switching costs are really unclear. So just to summarize, like, still, do you think it's a wide open game when it comes on the coding side, or do you think, like, you're basically got a world where it's down to Claude and Cursor and, maybe Codex, although I don't hear from them that much anymore? Or like,
you will have those big platforms that will seem to be kind of pulling away when it comes to coding. But when it comes to us building our software, and for example, the models that we use, we put a lot of effort at the start to make sure that we can switch from one to the other. We're evaluating all the time different models. So how you think about your architecture, how you're building software, how you're also thinking about all the things you're putting around your evaluations, your RAG versus using just this. I'm sure we're using certain things that we build things will be thrown away at some point or re-architecting. But on the development side, I'm not really sure how that's going to change.
There's development, there's patient care. Anywhere else in the org that you're
customer service is, again, I'm amazed at the improvements there. We use Intercom's Fin. And Fin, when we started, again, with Fin, a lot of work when we started there on policy and compliance and risk. Massive step. And it took a lot of work to make sure we get that right. And when we launched, Fin's had a CSAT of 60%. Fin has a CSAT of 89% now.
Wow.
It's equivalent
And what time frame was that?
It got from 60 to 80 within about 6 months.
Wow.
It's now been 18 months, I want to say, we've been using Fin, almost 2 years. And it's handling a huge amount of volume. So a big part of our inbound is handled by Fin. The resolution is great. Again, we had to learn a lot there to really pass it on to an agent quickly versus really trying to solve the problem. So then increase the confidence of when we do pass something on, we know we're going to solve it. Fin will solve it.
Intercom is a legacy.
Yes.
In this world, legacy, right? And the big question is do people double down with their legacy providers? Do they swap them out? And so you clearly made a conscious decision to double down with Intercom.
When we selected Fin, the other tools that are out there were not as advanced at the time. So, with all those things, it's we started with Zendesk, and it was impossible to switch out of Zendesk, and it was big. And then we moved to Intercom, and really glad that we did. I'm sure also the switching process is becoming a lot easier, right? And the companies that are building those tools will be building their own kind of pipelines to switch you from one to the other. So I think we're just going to benefit from that. We use kind of obviously internally in the back end of the business for our clinicians, we use scribes, again, very carefully and very selectively where we use that. No takers for consultations. We are building kind of our own first medical device to change some data from unstructured to structured. That's really exciting because we are sitting on a ton of data that we've accumulated over the years and putting that in a structured format.
This has come up a few different times, actually. Can you just describe what structured and unstructured data, like what's the difference?
Within, it's going basically from an entry in your, database, in your data model that is free text that somebody needs to pull in and read a human to make interpretations. You take in that free text and you translate it to a specific variable that you've put in your code. So then that becomes part of your database, and then you can run queries on it. I will come to Numan, I will speak to a clinician, and the clinician will write a note about what I said, or I will provide an answer in a questionnaire that is something that I've written. Or I will answer a question in a drop down, but that will be left somewhere where I gave the answer. And the problem with that is that you can't really use it. You can only use it if a human goes and reads that and interprets it and then makes a decision. Now imagine that I took that unstructured data and I put it in a very specifically encoded place in my database. So maybe you said that you have an upset stomach as a side effect from using a GLP-1, and rather than being something that somebody reads in a screen, I can say, Keith, who is X years old, who has this and this and this characteristics, reported a side effect, which was this side effect, and he was using that medication. Now, all of a sudden, I have a really interesting piece of information there that is meaningful, that I can then connect it with other pieces of information, and then I can make decisions. If I don't do that, then I would need to have somebody go and pull up Keith's profile, read what he wrote there, and then make a decision whether you can proceed with X, Y, and Z. Whereas now I can surface to the clinician, 6 months ago, Keith said this, watch out for that, and then the clinician can make their own decision. So it is genuinely transformational on how you can build effectively user experiences and patient experiences that you just couldn't do before.
And can that be automated, or is there, do you have your own internal version of Scale AI where someone is going through and doing that? Because
you can use specialist companies that are that is what they do, and they also have a specialization in healthcare. And then you can use other tools that can automate the process based on the work that they do. But you are stepping into, again, medical device territory the moment you start doing that. So you need to be careful on how you do this.
But as the world shifts from every company having massive amounts of unstructured data, I mean, Numan's what, 8 years old, you said. If you're talking about a company that's 25 years old, it magnifies even more. Is the answer going to be there's data labelers galore for the next X number of years, just going back because we all have got data, but the only way to make it useful is to have it become structured?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work left for those companies. I think it's what for me is interesting is that you need data labelers, but you need specialisms as well. It's not is this a cat or is this a cookie kind of mechanical Turk stuff. You need some real expertise there. I don't know how easy it will be, but also I do know that, again, this is the interesting, the compounding thing here. The more you do that work, the better the machine gets in doing more advanced work. So eventually you get to this point where you have structured the world's data and it all exists in one place. And that can affords completely new, different ways and models and more learning, because you're learning for more robust data, more research, more development, more advancement.
You haven't mentioned marketing, which I think is interesting because I assume, just based on the number of ads I see here in the States, that marketing is a big part of the company.
Using those tools in marketing, I've got to admit, we're using some. We still haven't found the sweet spot in terms of what can we do to scale that and keep the quality to where we want it to be. So there's still a lot of kind of manual work that we do. It's one of the big areas of improvement for 26, because we're probably leaving quite a lot of efficiency on the table there. I'd love to hear what you have found work well there.
It's really all over the board, from talking to people on the creative side. This notion that you can't replace taste is still very real. But there's also a real ability to scale up the amount of creatives and the amount of, through the use of avatars, the amount of people that you can test what resonates from an audience, what resonates with the demographic. And so this scalable influencer avatar tied with messaging feels like it's the current sweet spot. Doesn't change necessarily, is it the right message? It just gives you the opportunity to maybe take more shots at goal.
It's super interesting. And you can see the quality of some of that is really in a very different place to where it was 6 months ago, a year ago. So yeah, I think this year I don't think we've stepped into that yet, but it's definitely worth testing.
Yeah, we've been using Creatify and some other ones just to move it along. But it's crazy how good it's gotten. And every 90 days, it just takes leaps forward. So finance is one other bucket you haven't mentioned. And for, again, since you just mentioned the date, the last week has been I think my entire feeds have been about Claude Code replacing Excel, or as part of Excel now, and now you don't need analysts anymore. Are you all seeing anything in that front, or still too early?
I find that it takes away the specification and the requirements kind of phase, or the communications kind of phase. Like, to give you a couple of examples, I was speaking to somebody from our talent team the other day about us being more strategic about talent acquisition. And I found myself, as I was trying to describe what I'm talking about, to say, just one sec, actually, give me 1 minute. And I just asked Claude, make me a dashboard for strategic talent acquisition. And within about 30 seconds of having that conversation with that, I was like, that's what I mean. And I'm like, oh yeah, totally, I get that, and I've worked a little bit on this. So imagine in a different world what that would be, right? And how long it would take to do that. You can just very quickly get to a mock-up of what it is that you're doing, and really shorten the cycles that it takes. So I don't think we need to trust our decision making. We're not going to trust our decision making on Gen AI when it comes to our finance. That's the last thing. the last part. We want to have absolutely complete confidence on the numbers that we're producing, but we can get a lot quicker with a whole bunch of other stuff. Product again and design with Figma AI now. I can't remember what their tool is. Well, you can get prototyping very quickly. We spent again, we're working on something that's a different kind of experience than the one that we have now. Last year, we spent so much more time we should have on things that we could have prototyped in a matter of hours or days. And product and design is a thing where you're going to get, especially when it comes to product, you're going to go much more into, rather than write in PRD, I've done a prototype, and some of the people in the business are doing this. So what do you think about that? And work with engineering teams and design teams that can really operate also at that level of abstraction. So that just means that creativity and understanding and all those things around stakeholder management and the internal discussions that you need to have, you can make those a lot quicker. And as you do more and more of that, I'm pretty sure we're going to get to that fidelity and that quality that you'd be able to put things out there much faster than you did before.
Like, how do you approach both driving adoption and communicating the realities of change?
First, a lot of that stuff is let people know what they can use and how they should use it, and enabling them to do that. I think it is using examples and celebrating those successes widely in the business. I don't think we've gone yet. We don't have a good metric of that we can type performance in. But at some point, I think you don't want to. The last thing you want to do, for example, if one of our developers is not comfortable using AI, is force that person to start using Cursor or Claude to write their code. But I just want us to kind of, for everybody in the business, to be thinking how they can intelligently use those tools to make smarter and better decisions. We were at a place where there was some fear last year about, we had people that were worried about job security and about what they do. I think we all understand now kind of where the world is going and how you can use those tools. So I see a lot more willingness to engage from people, a lot more usage as well.
And do you have a policy on what is usable and what isn't, and what's expensible and what's not? Or is it, so go back to marketing, right? If someone wants to play around, these things are not cheap anymore. Like how do you...
We have a procurement process. We're fairly relaxed about things as long as they don't start getting access to our data.
Right.
So you can't plug in an email automation tool to get your emails, because you might inadvertently leak data that is sensitive. Whether we don't have that data in our emails, but you need to be... so security is the other thing. Security and quality is where, again, we've been investing a lot more. It's very tempting to just jump in and start using all of those tools, but we operate in a business that handles the most sensitive data that we can have about you. So that represents a different level of kind of quality and risk. So if something is going to be used and deployed by us, it has to go through the proper process.
So as you take a step back and you look at where you've been, where you are, and then flash forward a couple of years, what's the biggest impact AI will have on the organization and its ability to scale?
I think clarity and alignment across teams should be very different to what it is now. We should be able to make it much easier to just focus on doing work and executing and collaborating in the right way. I think the quality of the work we can do in a shorter amount of time will also be transformed, which means that we should be able to grow our teams, grow on people, and grow efficiencies as well. So do more. It'd be interesting to see what metric we use to measure that, if it is revenue or profitability per employee, for example.
Right, revenue per employee, right, should go up theoretically, right?
Yes. Outputs in terms of, and outcomes, of course, but outputs in terms of the things, we've got a pretty ambitious plan for the next couple of years, and we should be in a position to beat that plan and now to execute it, right? So that's the stuff that I'm excited about. Another thing that we have right now is a Looker and Slack kind of interpreter. So you can ask quite rich questions and get answers without needing an analyst to help you, or without needing to really figure out how to do SQL and how to use Looker, right? And one of the most common, more difficult requests that we have from all the teams is more data scientists and more analysts. And those are difficult and expensive people to get. So imagine if you train people and you give them easy to access tools, and you train them to ask the really good questions and then make really good decisions. You should be able to have a much smarter, productive organization as a whole.
You are using Looker and you're using Slack. It's interesting to see different people's views on their deepening within the legacy stack and others who are rebuilding it. So I'm curious to have this conversation in a year and see where you sit. But in healthcare specifically, when you look out then 2 to 3 years, how different is the experience because of that compounding that you mentioned?
The big themes that really drive our thinking and what we do, right? One is personalization. So in personalization, just really simply, it can be the right medication and the right dosage that you need to use to achieve the right results that can be really customized to you, right? And then it is the recommendations and the plan that we give that really matches you. What you expect, what you're going to react. We can also start being more predictive and telling you what is the right path for you. So that will be a lot more granular, genuinely personalized and effective than what it is today. The other dimension is the engagement across different parts of that care journey in different domains, which at the moment involves effort from you, coordination by somebody else. We should be able to safely guide you through that journey. If you need treatment, if you need to do a diagnostic, if you got on your results. So this distinction between I'm engaging with customer care with Numan, I'm engaging with the AI, with a coach, with a doctor, that should be a much more seamless, interconnected, contextually aware and relevant journey. And when you put those two things together, and again, you go back to removing a lot of that friction and a lot of that cost from the system. So you should be able to see a lot more usage. And if you see a lot more usage of all of those modalities and components, you should start seeing much better outcomes as well. That's the stuff that I think is really exciting. And you'll see that not in 2 years, I think, in sooner than that.
And then if you look back at sort of the journey to get where you are now, and you had to say, here's our big win from spending all this time and money on AI, what would you say it is?
Apart from the kind of productivity and the back office, we are seeing real engagement and retention improvements with the people that use the AI product. So that's the biggest one. And that was, to be honest, a question mark at the start, and conviction, and the early results were quite disappointing.
And so now, because the AI is involved, or your ability to sort of make use of it, it's being more meaningful.
But mostly the ability for us to make use of it in the right way.
That's awesome. And then final question, what's your personal tech stack? What are you using?
I use Gemini. I use less of ChatGPT than I used to. And then I just use some silly stuff for kind of fun.
That's the silly stuff. That's the stuff. That's the most fun
work. That's the stuff that I get from you. I'll write kind of personal songs to dedicate to friends, or do stuff with Sora to send to my wife and my daughter, and they find it quite funny.
That might be the highest EQ, least financially financially part of AI. That's like my favorite.
With Claude, I find it especially, I've been playing more with Claude for work.
And are you at the top tier? Like, what do you pay?
Yeah, I think I am, unless they released a new one. But the ability to use projects to start building kind of artifacts, to start having that kind of history, I think it's really interesting.
I agree. In the last month, yeah, I use them all, and my ChatGPT usage has gone down somewhat dramatically, shifted more to Gemini and Claude, and now it's, as you said earlier, just on the corporate side, it's very specialized in each case. And so I don't think it scales to spend on all three long term. So, but right now there's definitely things that each one is really good at. And, for whatever reason, the ChatGPT stuff is less valuable to whatever my current needs are. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how that kind of plays out in the next few months. But you can see a little bit of a bifurcation in the paths that they're taking.
Right. So on whatever date we're recording this, today I'd be long Anthropic and short OpenAI, but who knows? Talk in a couple months and we'll see.
Exactly.